Thank you, Corinne. So my name is Jody Williams. I am the co-chair for the First Nations, Métis and Inuit Education Association of Ontario. We are really excited to continue with this amazing series, and it is in partnership with the Math Knowledge Network, of which we are a part of. We run a community of practice in the area of Indigenous knowledge and mathematics, and that has what has led us into this incredible conversation over the last several weeks with some beautiful contributors who have taken the time to share their knowledge and wisdom with us. So our organization, we are a grassroots not-for-profit organization run by volunteers such as myself who dedicate their time to this subject association. And primarily we work to develop and create resources to support Indigenous education across Ontario, primarily K-12, but also for post-secondary as well. And we also work and lobby and advocate for high quality Indigenous education, particularly with respect to the ministry and creating when new curriculum comes out. So we advocate quite fiercely to ensure that our voices are front and center as Indigenous people. We have an Elders Advisory Council that is very important to our organization. These members are across Ontario, come from various communities, many of whom are fluent language speakers and also former residential school survivors, and they guide and direct the work that we do. And so that whatever we are putting out through our organization is supported and vetted through this really important council. So I would like to turn it over now to our host, Karen, who will take it from here. And thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Karen Recollet, and I have the incredible honor of being witness and I guess host to this conversation tonight. Last night, a lot of behind the scenes happenings happen during the course of this this series. And last night I had the opportunity to witness a pre-conversation that happened between Carlos and Tehahenteh, which were, in my mind, a series of poetic gestures, some glyph making, thinking about reemergence of Haudenosaunee glyph through language. So what I'll do is I'll begin with a series of provocations that I heard last night, and thinking if anything resonates with the speakers tonight, then maybe you can expand on it or think through it or take us along a journey with you. So last night we talked about the luminosity of stars as wayfinding devices for folks to fish. How are the fish finding and being in relation with us? And how are we in relation with them? What does relationality look like, feel like, sound like? What are the languages of love, of holding tender and precious our kin, our extended kin, and more than human relations? How do light waves move? And how can we mimic these movements to gesture a future that is safe for Indigenous and Black people, that is safe for Indigenous and Black children? What are the languages of relationality that we can think alongside as we manifest these patterns, shapes, and gatherings that you, Carlos, and Tehahenteh orbit, align yourselves with? So what do we hold precious? And who do we hold tender? And what are the ways in which we can hold space with more than human relatives? So tonight we have the honor and privilege of being witnesses to this conversation between Tehahenteh Miller. Tehahenteh is Turtle Clan, Kanien'kehá:ka from Six Nations of the Grand River, Haudenosaunee Territory. He is a fluent Kanien'kehá:ka speaker raised by his grandparents, Henry and Beatrice, who are also fluent speakers. Tehahenteh co-wrote the native language curriculum document, grades 9 and 10, for the Ontario Ministry of Education and Training, and was a key contributor to Literacy Ontario's Kanien'kehá:ka Mohawk language project. So before he was he also spent 25 years as an artist and business owner in Toronto. And Tehahenteh enjoys collecting and processing sap from his sugar bush to create maple syrup, which we love. Dr. Juan-Carlos Chavez was born and raised in the Yaqui, Sonora Territories of the American Southwest. Carlos holds a PhD in information science from the University of Washington, Seattle, and his areas of research is information, poverty, bridging the digital divide. Currently works as a NASA astrobiology program educational affiliate and has directed NASA-funded STEM initiatives focused on American Indians and Alaska Natives. So without further ado, Tehahenteh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Según se waguayo, Tehahenteh ni waksinoda, waganyakahaga, da waganyata. That means that my name is how I'm known by, is what they call me is Tehahenteh. And Turtle Clan and Mohawk of the Six Nations on the Grand River in the boundaries of Canada. So welcome everyone. And it's a pleasure to be making this presentation to you.
Thank you. Carlos, would you like to say a few words?
So Liosem Chanivu, otherwise known as the Spanish name Juan Carlos. My indigenous name is Huatlipiri, or Quadi for short, which means guard, like a guardian and warrior. And the guard part is because I am the oldest sibling in my family, and the warrior is because I served in the military as in the infantry. So I'd like to first acknowledge all the powerful women that have put this opportunity together for us as humble servants to give this conversation. Thank you, Karen, Jody. I'm not going to get all the names right, so I apologize to all of you for not saying it, but I just want to just acknowledge everybody for having me here. Corinne, I think I got that wrong, and Priya, so, and everyone else that was involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe Tehahenteh, can we start with your offerings for the evening?
Yes, I must always start the way that we've been instructed to start, which is to align our energies with the energies around us, not just here on Earth, but in the entire cosmos. So bear with me, and I'll just give a little interpretation of it after this. So what do we see? Got any gadi wasa? Nene in a hotel, so what got one? Got to John Jade. Nene ungwe soon. Zini chinji gadi kanu. Ne wahe ne. 820 hoyero. Ne royan and down. Nene wasu wage luhase. Zini si I dun hedgege. Got to John Jade. Nungadi 828 no one done die 18 parado. Holy Guaguegos in a hotel, so what got one? Got to John Jade. Nenangoyat the yeri stakwa. Sa uyero, it's got on yade. Nenezini si wasigo to the dunya. Dana aguego yatega yeri. Nenezini si aguego skane yodio daje. Ningwayatagan hatsuna. Nugidi zini si ningwara how. Dietino parado. Nana aguego na hodan what got one got yade. Dietone tonganigo. Nigo. Nene oni. Nuwa. 8 to 9 no, the one I hear that day. Nene dion kiadum. I am kiatanasta hajene. Nene wahe I am ki sarine. Nene at the katsura, the gayaga, Nene zini easy, sir. Nungadi 8 to 8 no, what did you know what I done you? Where ne, Dim Kiada don't die to ne doing any what to go on. Nene nuwa, Nene sway at diesel, and I'm going to hold around her. Niho year got to Johun Jade, ne only tit garuhiade. That see the one who harado, Yoris and what got one. Die to ne again and what to go on. To go ten and hold it, Daga Daddy Hook, that says you white sway, that soon's what got when I got on what I don't. The 8 when I got one again, and on 8. The way that we're instructed, it's an alignment of energies continually. Every time that we get together, as human beings. Anytime that there's something really important to do, like get up in the morning and open your eyes, the first things that we do is we give thanks to how everything has come together and how everything still is together. And so we direct our attention towards this knowledge that we have to draw from. And every time we do that, we strengthen this bond between all living things. Because as we know, as it's not just a belief, it's something that we actually know, that we are connected to everything here on this earth and in the cosmos. And that's an instant connection. So first of all, we direct our attention towards the people, the human beings that have come to live here on earth. And it was the intent that the one that put all of this together gave us instructions as how to go about living our lives in a full and a blessed way. And so to the people, we say, thank you for your contributions, because your contributions are extremely important. Because if we're not helping each other out, then we're working against each other. So we collect our minds together and we say, we welcome you and we wish the very, very best in this moment. And we also intend that these moments continue in this good way. And so that's directly to the people. Then we go through a complete list of all the different things here on earth that are here for our benefit. And we start out with the waters and the life within the waters. We go to the land and all the things that are growing on the land, the grasses and the medicines that are on within the grasses, the roots, the barks, the leaves, the stems, it just goes on and on. And all the other things that are here on earth, all the trees that are growing. And we talk about the animals, or we talk to them, and we talk to the birds, and all of these things. There's insects in there, and there's literally everything that you can think of. And it would take us all night if we actually sat down to list them all. But we put them all together, and we say that all of these things here were placed here in this great web of life for our benefit. And so when we disconnect these threads, these it's like a spider web, it's delicate. And that's why it requires our energy and our attention, because that's the way it was put together. And so to all of those things, we give greetings, love, and respect. And then we also look to the sky world, and we say, in the sky world, many, many things again. We have the thunder beings that have their responsibilities. We have the winds that control the weather. We have the sun that basically provides all the life here on earth. We have the moon for the nighttime sky, and that's in partnership with our mothers, we call. And we say that our mothers, because that's the most important thing that they give life. And so to Grandmother Moon, we call her Grandmother Moon. We say greetings, love, and respect, because you do those things. In the sky world was also the stars, and we'll be talking more about that tonight. And then we direct our attention towards these ones we call our Diunkiardo. They're our protectors, our spirit guides, if you will. There's really not a word that covers it well in English, but these are entities that have already been here on Earth and have experienced what we've experienced. And so to those entities, because of their experience, they become our guides, and we can draw on them anytime that we wish. That's where we draw our intuition, our creativity, and our inspiration from. And so I've asked them tonight to join all of us and to touch each and every one of us in a special way to develop those special attributes that we need, because we're doing this for the benefit of all our young folk that are in need of this kind of guidance. And so we thank them for their contribution, and we say thank you. Greetings, love, and respect. And then we talk to creation. And this creation is great intelligent energy that I'll talk more about in a few moments. And that intelligent energy put all of this in alignment, everything in its place, everything with its duty, everything with its responsibility, including the human being. And so to this entity, we say special greetings, love, and respect because of the love that was given to us. This was all put together in the purpose of love so that we could share this in every moment of our life. And to this entity, we say thank you. Greetings, love, and respect. And this is the way our minds are to be. And so if there are things in your life that you wish to give thanks to this entity, thanks to this energy that put all this together, then it is up to you individually right now to give those thoughts in your thinking, in your intention, and to give your own thanks in your own special way. And those were the words that were given tonight. Taito. Okay, ready to start. So, are we ready to start this presentation?
We're ready.
Okay, so do that share screen, and you should be seeing something coming up here momentarily.
We see it. Nice job.
Wonderful. Okay. Here we are, kind of like how I would describe a grain of sand in all the beaches of the world. That's the immensity of this cosmos. And that's just the kind of thing that human beings that we can understand. And so, forgive me sometimes if I will just ramble on about what I understand. We do have a chat box you'll see on your screen there someplace to ask questions, and the people who are handling all those technical things, Karen and Jody, will be looking at those screens. So they may give some prompts if there's something that goes unexplained. So I'm going to be covering a lot of territory, and so I'm just sort of skimming over the top, hitting those things that we need to understand as sort of like a base before we get into the intricacies of it, the details of it. But those questions are naturally going to come. So with my experience, is with language, and all of this, what I'm going to share with you, comes from that sharing in language. I didn't grow up as a first language speaker. I came to it as a second language speaker, and in the same hand, that's sort of kind of an advantage because this is so like new to me. And as I was growing up, I just need to share this little thing. as I was growing up, my grandparents, because I was raised by my grandparents, they'd just be talking about it, and they had many friends who would come over all the time, and they would be talking about things that as children were really not that interested in. So there's the memories that come back are kind of like, oh, I remember somebody saying this. I don't even remember who it was. But they were also they were all language speakers, and they were all coming from this same dimension of language and how we understand that, and grappling with many things that we do as original people. And so to me, when I learned about things and I learned about ceremonies and why those ceremonies were going on and what that meant, and sort of like the bits and pieces of philosophy that would sort of come back to me years later, I have this long memory that I really can't place where it came from. It didn't come from a book anyway. And so from what I'm going to give you here is from our language. And the more that I study the language, the more that I'm convinced that this language is not of this world. It's got so much information in it that it's hard to fathom its depth. So as we go along, we're going to be discovering things together. So the first one up here, and I put this, it's the first two words up there. And in a nutshell, I guess, here's how I place it. As a great intelligent energy located in the cosmos, which was always in existence and wished to expand its knowledge. And like, I think later on, because we've got Carlos coming on too, he might want to talk about this, how the understanding, and I don't even know how the science understands, and it says that the universe is continually expanding. And so that's our beginning. And I'd just like to move on to the next screen here. So I think it's this one. Okay, there it is. So our language is made up of, it's called a polysynthetic language, which means it's made up of bits and pieces of information. In fact, it's kind of, each word is the equivalent to a sentence in English. So here we have two words. So basically we have two sentences, or maybe even two paragraphs. And I've used purple and black here just so that you can see the bits and pieces of information that I've put off to the left hand, the bottom portion there. And so we've got this across the top there. And so each of these pieces of information is what makes up our words. And so we can't really define how many words there are. Like in English, you have probably 7,000 or 8,000 words, and everything else is a compound word. And we can't say that, because it's just like spinning the wheels. You can change these bits and pieces of information any way you want and come up with actually a new word. It's kind of like you come up with a new sentence. So if you said in English, how many sentences are there in English? Which is an impossible question. So that's why we can't quantify the number of words that we have. So these key ones here is the KA. These are all consistent meanings. So when we use the KA, it's our pronoun, and it happens to be a female pronoun. So anything that has strength or has power this is the prefix that it will have. It's the pronoun that it will have. And it also means that whatever that follows it has been modified or changed from that ST stands for something natural. In other words, something in its very natural or raw state. The satsta in there, the next word, is the how we talk about this energy force. So that's a verb. The SER, and we have a variety of these nominalizers, or if you will, noun makers. What that does is doesn't have a specific meaning except to make everything as a verb. It converts it to a noun. And now that we have a noun, now we can add on to the meaning by the joiner, by putting the A on it. And in this case, for this particular word, we've added Goa on it, which translates to great. It's an immeasurable, endless, great. It's so huge that we can't quantify it. So we put all of this together, and what do we have? We have this great, immeasurable, endless energy force that has been modified from something natural. It has very much strength, and this is how it's defined. The second word here is Satwiyera. And this part here, the SA, means the same, or exact, or exactly, or precise, or precisely. And the Oyera means being such and such by birth. In other words, it had a birthing. It's also in motion. And also it means being naturally so. So here we have all of this put together to talk about this great intelligent energy. And so those are the bits and pieces that comprise this word. And so I thought that had to precede this, because now I have to take this word and now put it into what we understand in English. So in our original languages, which this is, the energy is described as a living entity of great intelligence. This energy wished to expand its knowledge and brought into existence which we know exists on Earth and throughout the cosmos. Everything that would ever exist was initially created as an idea or a thought. And just that kind of rings a little bell, because our previous presenter, Wilford, had said something very, very similar to that as well. So this is in the form of thought or spirit world. However you define that, it's an abstract. So this non-physical plane is eternal and it's benevolent. And this energy can be called anytime that we have a need. And so we do this through our thought. So those thought forms also bring this into the realm of matter in the shape of physical entities. So instructions were given to us as human beings. All forms of creation, in other words, if we're looking at the picture here and it's got all those sand, it has a purpose. And you see in the distance there, all those trees out there, they have a purpose. All of those things were given out as instructions that I'll talk more about to all things everywhere. And to call these manifestations, or to call these ideas into manifestations, one only needs to call this great mystery, or come to this great mystery with a grateful heart, and it will bring the needed ideas into physical reality. And so that's how I would describe those two words in English. And then, because this great intelligent energy expands the universe, the cosmos, it is everywhere and it exists in all things. It's the living force. And so we start out with this word at the top. And that word is odzisto. And this is the shortest form of the word that we have that describes, the simplest form, that describes what a star is. So, like I said, these bits and pieces of information here again. So we have the O, which always tells us, whatever word that O starts with, we know that it's something natural. In this case, we're looking at the root word. It's a simple root word. And that exist part is a spark or a flame or something in between, as a spot or like a dot, if you will. So, because when we look up from Earth, that's basically what we see. We see these little spots of specks of light. And we know that's how it exists. And we know that light is still coming. Some of these stars have literally expired. And their light is still, they're so far away that that light is still coming to us. And that's the thing that we still see. And on all of our words, well, I'm not going to say all, but the majority of our words ends in a vowel. And in this case, that vowel is an O. And so this tells us then, it's an aspect that tells us how it exists. So that's what it is to us that we see. And so we just take another step, and an older word that we have is ojistokwa. And I'm not going to go through the O and the G again, but you're going to see the one that has the accent on it there. It's got an upstress on the O. And so that's how it used to exist. And the H that follows it is, it says here, apathetic aspirate, which doesn't mean too much to most people. Basically, it's a breath of air. So that particular word needs that breath of air. And so it really doesn't have a meaning. It's just there for how it sounds. So it sounds correct. The KW is a reversive feature. And that reversive feature means an undoing. So I think, again, if Carlos, you could make a little note maybe just to come back to that part, because you know all of those scientific terms about what that undoing is. So probably we'll need an explanation about how the star comes to be and how it does its undoing, or perhaps I'm thinking that undoing has to do with the supernova, so that its entire lifetime is expressed in this word. I need to go now because what I struggle with personally is this word myth. And that only came this afternoon. I started looking for some pictures to help me out with it. And then I came across a bunch of sites on the web, and it all talked about a creation, or it said Iroquois creation myth. And I'm thinking, why would it be used as a myth? Because we know it to be a reality. So we know it to be our history. And the deeper that we look into this, we understand that it is in fact a fact. It may not be a fact in the sense that we being human beings, we tend to not associate it with abstraction too well. We have difficulty understanding it, and so we almost need the science to be able to explain a little bit about it so that we can say, okay, now I sort of get an idea about it. And in our tellings, and that's the word that I use when I'm talking about, I don't even like the word story, because story is just like there are so many fictional stories. Well, this is not a fictional story. This is how we understand it to be. And we have a very long history of what happened in the sky world, or when we talk about sky world, we're talking about a parallel universe, a parallel world that exists way beyond the stars. And so I just need to explain a little bit about that upper world. And in that upper world, there is a long history about this man and woman who come together, become married, and start their family. And in their world, here, what's in the drawing that you see there is just a painting. What you see is you see this tree, and the tree at the point in this picture has been knocked over. And so it came to be in this sky world where the woman who was then pregnant from her husband, she has a craving. And so she asks her husband to go out and have him dig up this tree. The tree of life is how this tree is described. This tree has everything. It has the light, it has the nourishment, it has the food supplies, it has everything that they need in that world environment. It is their source of life. Just like we look around and we see the grass growing, we see the trees, and we see the animals and all the rest of it, and we have the sun as light. But this was how it was described in this creation. It was described as the tree of life. And the people of that land, that sky world, were told never to do anything that would interfere or harm this tree, because it was precious to their survival. And so when Sky Woman asked her husband to go and dig up a root, she was reacting from, I guess, we suspect, a craving that she had because she was pregnant. And she longed to have this root, to taste this root. And her husband didn't want to go out right away, but he finally did, because she insisted that he goes out and he gets her one of these roots. When he does, he goes there and he starts digging to find the root, and he accidentally makes a hole. And he makes a hole in their universe. And he peered into it, and all he could see was water through this hole. And it frightened him because he'd never seen anything like this before, certainly not a hole in their world. And so he was just like perplexed. He didn't know what to do. And Sky Woman, she got impatient waiting for her husband to come back. So she went out there herself to see why he hadn't come back with the root that she had asked for. So she got there, and I don't want to go into all the details of it. I'm just going to say that she went through this hole. She leaned forward, she went through it, went through the hole. She fell, or she may have been pushed, or she may have slipped. It really doesn't matter. The fact is that she went through this hole that was created in her universe. And according to the telling, it says that she goes through this tunnel, and then this tunnel is black. And so she's reaching out, and she's reaching to grab something to stop her fall. And as she's falling, that's some of the words that she expresses as well. And she says, "Nikne ovnega ego." All she could see in her fall was that there was water. That's all that she could see, the direction that she was falling towards. And meanwhile, in this world of water, there's the animals, and there are also birds as well. And when we're talking or using the words like birds, we're not really talking about physical birds. We're talking about an energy that has this ability to be uplifting. So in this case, we're calling them geese. And all the animals here on the earth, they immediately notice that there is a entity falling through space, and they realize that there's a need to help out, because if she comes down, she's definitely going to get hurt in some way. So they collect their thoughts together, and they say, we need to do something. And these geese were the ones that said, we will be the ones that help. And we go up and we will gentle her fall. So they go up with their energies, and they feather her fall. So she's coming to earth on the wings of birds, or on the wings of these energy beings that have come up to greet her. So meanwhile, here on earth, the animals are saying, well, what are we going to do? Because she's going to land in the water. And so the animals got together, and they said, there's got to be a way where we can, someplace to put her. And so we call the great turtle is the one who volunteers. And he says, I have this capacity to bring myself up on top of the water, and at least she can rest on my back. So that's where they place her. And they place her there. And so when she is placed there, the back is just as bare as the back of a turtle. And all that you can see on the back of the turtle is you can see where the pieces of the turtle back comes together, and it's kind of like a mosaic look. 13 pieces in the middle, and like 28 sub pieces all the way around the outside. And those 13 divisions on the back represents the 13 moons, and the 28 smaller sections around the outside, that means that there's 28 days to each moon, which is almost a perfect calendar. And when she lands, she is frightened because she doesn't know how she's going to survive. What she brought with her is she brought with her a variety of seeds. She brings original tobacco with her and a number of other things that she has with her, but there's no place to plant anything. So the animals help her, and there's another long telling about how the animals actually do it. One of the animals, actually the water animals, bring her up a handful of soil, and she puts that down on the back of the turtle, and she goes in a counterclockwise directions, and she shuffles as she goes along, spreading the dirt, spreading the earth. And as she spreads the earth, she's also dropping the seeds as she goes along. And so if you look at the back of a turtle, you'll see in between the joints, where it's sort of like your bathroom floor, if you've got tile, it's the grouting in the middle there that has collected from the water. It has like sort of like a mossy surface, a felty kind of surface in between. And this is the first life forms. Those life forms then will turn into another life form. And so they keep on growing and keep on growing until you see on the back of this, we have many variety of plants and things that are growing. And so that's basically how the all the living things get to be where they are, or the way that we see them today. So as I said before, this is Sky Woman here in the center. And she was pregnant when she came down. Her daughter was born, and the daughter grew up. And when it was time for her to have, or when she is of age, it's her turn to give birth. And she becomes pregnant with the west wind. They marry. And she has twins. And the way it's described is that the west wind brought down, because there were no other beings here at the time, and the west wind brought down 2 arrows, and it was placed on her chest. And one arrow was crooked and the other arrow was straight. And so that represents now the duality, because we've already been introduced to duality, because Sky Woman and her daughter were the first 2 female beings. And if you remember going back to the pronoun that I talked about in the words that we looked at, that Ka, and that's the reason why we always refer to the female as being the one with the greatest strength, because she was the first one. She was the one that had to endure this barrenness that she came down to. And then her daughter in the same way. She had twins. So we're looking at duality. And when we look at duality, we also have to consider that these 2 entities, they're her babies that were born, were opposite. Even though they were twins, one had to come out first. And even when she was carrying the children, the 2 babies were talking to each other, and they were in disagreement already. And one was saying, oh, I'm going to come out any old way that I want to come out. And his brother is saying, oh, no, that's not the right way. There's a proper place for you to come out. and that's the way it should be. And they argued and argued, and finally, the one that's called Holder of the Heavens, he's the one that finally gives in, and he says, all right, and he says, I'll be the first one to be born, and I'll show you how that's to be. And so he was the first one born, and his brother, called Scoe, which means something very sharp, or flint. He had like crystals on his body, and he had a sort of like these spikes on the top of his head, right in the center. So it was very, very sharp, and he insisted on coming out his own way, which he did. And he came out the side of his mother and in fact kills her. And all the while, grandmother is there, and she observes the firstborn, which was the Holder of the Heavens. And so she takes him and she turns around to wrap him up. And meanwhile, the Flint, I'm going to call, or Crystal, the other one, he came out the side, and she didn't witness that, but her daughter perished from that. So as the boys were growing up, they grew up quickly as well, and the Flint, he was the favorite because he was the prettiest, the most beautiful of the two. And so grandmother really, really loved him. And it was Flint who said that it was his brother, the Holder of the Heavens, who had killed his mother. And because grandmother loved him so much, she loved Flint so much that she believed him. So she believed the lie. And she then took the Holder of the Heavens and she told them to get out of their house. And it says, that means that she threw him into the field as far as she could possibly throw him. And she told him, don't you ever come back. Don't you come back for food. You're not welcomed here anymore. You killed my daughter, and you have to be out on your own. So here's this Holder of the Heavens, and he's out on his own right now. And so he goes about, and he's got to survive. So he fashions himself a bow and arrow. And so now that he's got himself a bow and arrow and something that he can use as a survival device, he then goes around and he's practicing with his bow and arrow. And this is really kind of like a nice picture that I may come back to this portion in a while. Anyway, he's practicing, he shoots an arrow, and the arrow goes way out into kind of, if you've ever shot an arrow and you shoot it up into the air, it doesn't take very long at all before that arrow just literally disappears. And so now he didn't hit what he was aiming at. So now he's got to go look for his arrow, because he didn't have that many arrows. So he's out looking for his arrow, and says it came down in a place that looked like water. And what I'm thinking is that it was probably a mirage, because where it did come down, it was just like a hollow, clay-filled area. And so he sees where his arrow did in fact come down. And as he's going across this, looks like maybe could be the bottom of a shallow lake that's dried out. As he's walking towards his arrow, there's another being that shows up and is walking in his direction. And so he takes note of that. And so when he meets this other being, other being starts talking to him, and he says, "I know you," and he calls him by name, and he says, I know your grandmother," and he calls her by name, and he says, "I know your brother," and he says, "I know what your brother did to you," and he said, he gives him this teaching about what happened and not to blame his grandmother for believing a lie. And he said that it's not really her fault. I mean, she loved his brother so much that she believed him. And so this is what happens when lies occur. So there's a very long story about telling about how all the things that he goes through to hear this thing about how he's not to be holding a grudge against his mother, and to forgive her, and to forgive his brother as well. So then, as we know, that there were many, many things created. And so when these two brothers grew up, they went around as well, making things. And they added on to the things that were already in existence. So they added many different types of grasses. They rendered all kinds of new animals, new birds, and between the two of them, they helped creation to complete. And then Taro Hiwago, the holder of the heavens, he goes out and he says, "Here, I must inspect all of this." And so he goes out and he's looking all around him. And he says, "Oh, this is so perfect. Everything is pristine. The waters are the clearest. It's just like in the world that they came from. And the forests and all of the varieties are all working together. And the way the trees are made, they're producing the way they're supposed to produce. They're enriching the air," and just goes on and on about all the things that he's looking at. He's seeing that this is all just so perfect. The animals, here we have and the animals were released, and here it's even a little bit hard to see the deer, but that was an intentional thing too. So all of these things, all of these intentions was working perfectly. They're almost perfectly camouflaged. And so all of these animals, all the birds, all creations, all the trees and grasses and everything were in a state of perfection. And so when that happens, he says, "I am pleased with what I see here. And now it is time for me to introduce the human being to this environment, because this was the purpose of creating this environment." So he goes and he picks up the clay, and he said, "I pick up this clay and I mold it, and I mold it into the shape of mankind. I make it into the shape of a human." And he said, "Now that I've made this doll, I've made this, we say Gaya Duni, it's representation of mankind. And of course, this is made from the earth. This is how we talk about matter. We talk about it as the clay." And so he makes this doll, and then he says, "Asa na gayata angewarare," which means that now he's going to put his breath into it. He does this 3 times. He pushes his breath into this clay doll, and it comes alive. And so now we have the spirit or the energy being, which was from the sky world. And remember that all of the previous beings were all in this spirit form, or in this non-physical form, I guess is probably the easiest way to say it, non-physical form. And we use the word spirit because it's English and we don't have a better word in English for it. So what has he done? He's actually combined the energy of the earth in the form of clay and the energy from the sky beings, which were energy beings, and put them into one. And then he says, now I have to give you instruction, because everything needs to be instructed as to what it's to do. All of these things on earth, all of the grasses, all of the medicines, all the trees, all the animals, they were all given a purpose so that they know what their role is. And you remember here that I mentioned earlier the Odzisto right at the beginning, the star. There's the Odzisto, and that's how we talk about the star. And then we say, now that's our starting point. So we start out from the stars. And he said, this is your gift. And what I give you is I give you Gadzista. And that's exactly what he did when he picked up that clay. He gave it breath. He gave it a flame. He gave it a spark. And that spark is the heat within us. So the Ka, again, it has been created from something natural. Okay, what was natural? You see that arrow up there to the O? The O is natural. Now it's become the Ka. And the Ka is given strength. And it's given its existence. It's given its instructions, because its instructions are that this heat is not permanent. It's only in a temporary form. And the purpose is to collect information and to take it back to the source, because it's the source, or that great intelligent energy, which is the source, that wanted to expand its knowledge. And it sent this being here to be able to be the first beings to collect this information. So this Gadzista at the bottom, it says Gadzista means the flame of life. And so it comes from the stars, and that's that star connection. And the other gifts that are given at that same time are these other gifts. And so the first gift that we see in the telling of creation is that this being came to the holder of the heavens, and he gave him a bow. And that bow is that first word at the top there as Aona. And so I've taken the green, and with all of these other words, I've highlighted that because that's the similarity between all of these words. And when the first time, maybe not the first time, but certainly a number of times after I had heard a few variations of creation, and I'm thinking, okay, here, the holder of the heavens shot his arrow, and he was already in possession of a bow. The entity that he met, who identified himself as being his parent afterwards, said, I'm going to give you this gift. So this is the first gift. He says, I give you this bow. It's the most beautiful. It's the strongest. It's the most awesome bow that you've ever laid your eyes on. And it's perfect. And personally, at that time, and I just have to add a little personal thing in because it's a discovery. And I didn't, because from there, the telling goes into another part of the telling, and it never really answered me as just being who I am. I'm thinking, this doesn't make any sense. He already had a bow, and now he's given another bow. And say, what do you do with two bows? You can't be, it's like one in each holster, No, that's not how a bow works. Until much later on, after Holder of the Heavens creates mankind. He says, these are the other gifts I give you. He says, these are precious things that I give you. He said, I gave you your life. I gave you that flame that's within you. And I also give you your language. And that's the second word on this list here, as in Owana. And you notice here that the E-N-N is the same as the bow, E-N-N, as part of the root word. And I'm still looking for a meaning for it. And creation also says, I also give you your song. And that's the third word. It's Garana. And again, you see the E-N-N is common to all the other words there. So the song and the words also have a commonality, just like the bow. And he said, I also give you Gahsana. This is your name. And your name is really, really important to be using your original name, because this is how the medicines will recognize you and know who you are. And this is how creation will know who you are, because that's a very special name. And he said, after all of these things are complete and these things are understood and taken care of, he says, then you will have Skana. And Skana is peace. So if we look at the top again, we see Aana for bow, Owana for our language, Gardana for our song, Gasana, our name, and Skana for peace. This all comes together. And so my brother is going to be helping me out with this portion in the middle here, the root word from another perspective. You see, I never really connected all of these, and I certainly didn't connect it with a bow. But now, in retrospect, I discovered this because I'm a bow hunter, and one day I was out practicing, and I took this one shot, and for some reason, it never struck me before, and I let the arrow fly, and I could actually hear the hum of the string as it released. And I thought, oh, oh, it just had this hum sound. And it was the vibration. And then I said, ah, there's the commonality. Because when we create in our words, that's why it's precious. We also create this vibration. We create in our songs, we create another vibration. In other cultures, they have things they call mantras, and I'm sure that's what it is. When it comes to our names, it also has this particular frequency. And the mystery of it all is when these are all in alignment, it means peace. It means contentment. It means clarity. It means everything we see clearly and beautifully. And this is where I would like my brother to come in and sort of give me his perspective on more about this energy, this vibration, these frequencies, because all of these frequencies, the majority of these frequencies, I'm guessing, are not something that we as human beings can literally hear. We do hear a certain range of it. And then if you look at animals, they hear a different range. And so they hear things that we don't hear. And now, what we know is like in the waters, the water is like probably one of the most conductive things, natural conductor of energy and vibration and frequency that we know. So that's how the water affects us. It's right from the beginning of this telling, when Sky Woman could only see water. And so I'd like to take just a little break here and see, have Carlos help me out here with your understanding of frequency and vibration, or frequencies and vibrations and energy patterns, the orbit.
Well, thank you.
Carlos?
That's so much power in the words and the logic streams, if you will, that is called in Western science. You've given us so much mana for us to consume. And there's frequency and there's space-time. You've discussed basically electromagnetic spectrum. You've discussed nebula, you discussed supernova. You discussed rhythms and vibrations, and all of these scientific words that are in textbooks. So our children, when they see those words, they become confused between the word and what it actually means. They already know the meaning behind those words. It's just that an English word was put in front of them for them to learn particular formulas, particular ways of communicating. And that's one of the pieces that we've really engaged with. I'd like to start by first acknowledging the fact that that you discussed a lot about language and what the words mean. And when we start to look at words, we look at the actual root of that word. One of the words that you had me to think about was undoing. When we think of the word undoing as a whole, it means a weakness. It means a downfall. But when we look at the word undo, it actually means to unfasten and to open, like opening a door or a window. So suddenly we go from an opening to a weakness. And that in itself is what the English language has done for our kids, is they learn these words without looking at the roots and the meaning, the intention behind that word itself. And that comes from, like what you said, frequencies that they have been eradicated. They have been eradicated from their lexicon, from their ways of thinking, because they go into the classroom and they hear these words and they forget the feeling that goes with that word. That's a frequency. So you talked about a reflective, pronoun. You talked about all of these ways that we communicate without using words. And I'll give you an example. We talked about when we see each other, we do one of these, or we do that, or something to that effect. We don't say a word, but magically, as Western science would say, we're friends. The Romans would do the same thing, but they're acknowledged for the salute, the military salute. So they've taken our ways of communicating with our hands and created a military frequency out of it, where that's not really what we were trying to do. We were trying to communicate with each other. So right now, in the airspace, who does that belong to? Does it belong to regulation authorities? Does it belong to the military? Is there airspace sovereignty? Those are our frequencies, but we can't communicate through those because they have been appropriated and they're owned by these organizations. So we can't really start to bring together these words, these vibrations, these frequencies together, because they have been systematically eradicated from our systems of knowing. So that's where we talk about, you talked about values. You talked about basically what we hold to be true. And in the Western societies, they have a mastery over nature. You talked about hunting and bow hunting. So you master it, you subjugate, you overcome. But in our communities, it's about harmony with the nature itself to be compatible or maintain a natural state. And as we know, nature is physics. Physics is nature. And you talked about that. It's about, in Western societies, it's about scheduled living. For us, it's non-scheduled living. We move through the stars. We move through the movement of the tides. We fish when the messengers, the birds that you described, tell us to fish. That's a vibration. That's an understanding of what's happening in our atmosphere, a dense atmosphere protected by the ozone layer that protects us from grandfather sun, as some folk would say. But what we say is it's in harmony with the star, the one star in our solar system. So the other part you discussed was about competitive individualism. We're all individuals competing for something, when in reality, our ways of knowing is non-competitive. It's deference. It's we all win. We win once we all allow others to win. It's all together. So that is connected in harmony in the frequencies. If I speak to you right now and I just open my mouth and nothing comes from my vocal cords, my voice box, will you hear anything? I'm communicating, but you can't hear me, and some people can read lips. That's the vibrations that we are exuding from our mouth to the animal kingdom. And then as the cosmos speaks, as there's the shift of the moon, of Grandmother Moon, as you talked about Grandmother Moon. Well, Grandmother Moon is slowly pulling away from us. Slowly but surely, she's moving away. And inevitably, we won't be able to see her anymore. And what are we being told by that? And through each movement, the tides come in, the water's moving. You discussed about hydrogen, H2O. You just talked about water and what that means to our communities. Well, in that case, when we talk about water itself, it's like you said, whenever there is a change, a shift, if you will, in the stars, most stars just fade away. They go away. But when it's a supermass star, it loses all its hydrogen, right? And then it just changes. And that's what you were discussing, is that change that happens when a star with a supermass, loses all its hydrogen. And so these ways of thinking, these ways of knowing are connected to our scholars like yourself, to our elders who talked about, and I wrote a note, that's why I'm looking for it right now, where Vine Deloria, essentially one of our scholars, Vine Deloria Jr., discussed that metaphysics of modern existence, and I'm going to read it, emphasizes that Native Americans have consistently perceived their realities experientially, confronting the reality of the experience, whereas Westerners often hold academic learning and theories above experience. And so I wanted to get that right. And what that tells us is that, the conversations that we're having about this alignment of, the tellings, the energies that are produced by those tellings, and then the frequencies that we share those tellings with each other, like you're doing now, is actually a form of communication that we knew, since the beginning of cosmos. So we talk about the acceptance of others on the basis of demonstrated personal integrity, rather than somebody who looks like us and somebody who stands with us. We look at their personal integrity. Our punishments are in shame. And that's something a lot of people don't understand. And that punishment comes from shame. And it's not punishment related to guilt. It's related to being ashamed for what I said and how I insulted you. Where in the Western system, it's about you're guilty until proven innocent. There's guilt. So within those constructs, the words that you're using, the roots, the suffixes, it's all about face-to-face government. It's about traditional over the systematic of hierarchy. We have our elders, we have our grandmothers, but as you've said, we are not a representative democracy. We have levels of wisdom and knowledge holders, tenders of fire, and all of these different services. These are pieces that relate to relationality. Our relationship to the stars is based on the fact that we too have these elements within our own bodies that, and as we've heard before, we are made of stars. So as we come into this conversation about frequency, as we come into this conversation about, what a hertz is, and we talked a little bit about formulas that Westerners use, the sine waves and cosine waves, and we know those concepts, but we don't use those words. Those concepts were appropriated, and then words like sine and cosine were added to them, so that we become confused by it. We become confused by sometimes we question ourselves. Do we know what we think we know? And that is because we send our kids to these schools and these books that are presented to them, and then they have to learn. You must learn that. You must pass this curriculum, and you need to get this score. Otherwise, if you don't, then as a teacher, I failed, so now I'm guilty. But in our community, we say, no, you should be ashamed of yourself because you didn't teach our kids the way we need to be taught. You didn't learn our ways. We have to learn your ways. You have done nothing to learn our ways. We speak your language, you don't speak our language. Why must we do double the work? And I think that's what the frequency is about, is we miss each other when it's kind of like grabbing a telephone and dialing the wrong number and suddenly having a conversation with somebody that you don't know. It's like, hello, you're having this conversation and they're like, what are you talking about? But when we're in the same frequency and the same wavelength, we are sharing, we are connecting with each other. So we talked about, in Western society's cultural aspirations to achieve a higher level, climb the ladder of success, and that's one of the things that we aspire to be the ways of old people, of our elders, our knowledge holders. That is our aspiration, to be philosophers like our elders. And so, as you said, our communities are not given those titles. They don't give you that PhD because you didn't go to their system and became more colonized and learned the books, and then now you have a PhD. But yet in our communities, you are the PhD, you are the professor, you are the elder. So these systems of difference exist within our communities because we don't connect to the energy fields that has been brought down to us by the great cosmos. We always talk about sharing the wealth. We talked about, that we don't save for the future, as it's said in the Western traditions. We accept that our role is really to be accepting and to demonstrate that personal integrity. So I threw a lot out there because I was responding to the words, and I did my homework. Tehahenteh, just wanted to show that I did my homework. But let me step back and be a little bit more linear, if you will. The first piece is that language indeed is brought to us from the great spirit, as we call it in my traditions in the Southwest. It comes from listening to the cosmos. It came from the animal kingdom, from the insects. Our vibrations, when we emit a sound, comes from these places that people would say it's mysticism. It's a story. It's not real. But if we sit down at night and turn all the luminosity and just all the sounds and everything, and we sit there and actually listen, You know, a lot of us actually speak our language if we just allow the cosmos and the energy field to talk to us. And we don't do that enough. And right now with this pandemic and all of this time that people are spending alone, some people are saying that they're tired or they're depressed, that they have nothing to do. When in reality, this is the way we've always lived with spirit. We've always lived in silence and listened to those frequencies from the cosmos. And what begins to happen is we start to open or undo, if you will, the colonial mindsets that have been brought into our bodies, our vessels, our ways of being. So as we come into this space of words and what it means to listen and what it means to aspire to acceptance, then we come back to this notion of the stars themselves. The stars have a life cycle. They go through the life cycle and they either fade away or they create, like you said, a supernova, right? There's something that comes to us. So moving through that pathway, if you will, that you've described so eloquently and brought to us, I start to think about what do we fall into when it comes to emotional spectrums? And this is something we had a previous conversation about. When we talk about that, do we actually know what the other person is feeling? We were given that gift by the cosmos. But a lot of times we don't pay attention to them and we repress because of patriarchy or misogyny or all of these different words that, you know, are used in the English language to eradicate our sensitivity and our ways of being. And because of that, instead of talking about, you know, the sine waves, I think we use the formula sine of 2 pi over t, periodic sine, you know, frequencies. Instead of those, we can say in the spectrum of emotions, where do we fall into and how do we feel about that particular thing? Should we have gone to the moon and insulted the moon and planted a US flag? Should we have done that? Is that the reason why Grandmother Moon is pulling away from us, because we've insulted her? What have we done? Are we supposed to try these formulas of ellipses and all of these different things to try to get to Mars and colonize Mars or explore Mars? You know, have we not learned from our ancestors that we are to be here present now? We are to be learning from each other right now. And until we get that right, we have no business going elsewhere. Right now, with all of these big issues that are happening in the States, there's a lot of pain, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. And you discussed yesterday, Tehahenteh, about, you know, our ancestors being buried and being pulled up with bulldozers. And now we have all these diseases and viruses and bacteria that were not there before. Why? We don't know. But in our traditions, we believe that you actually ask permission and you bury someone through that frequency and you permit, you know, yourself to cry and then you move and protect it. But through this system of oppression, over time, we have lost our abilities to connect to each other and to the systems and to the energy fields that is between us. So I wanted to kind of share a little bit about that because you've asked it of me, and also to talk about what you said about polarization, that, you know, these physical properties of light can be polarized or, you know, measured in the electromagnetic field alignment. And these kinds of words and these kinds of ways of thinking over time create this opportunity for us to come together and have these conversations. So I responded to a lot of the pieces. I added the concepts of emotions and ideas of our ways of being, only to reflect back, you know, respectfully, that I did my homework. And
Thank you. I have, because you had talked a little bit about our role in this. I have one more slide with one word on it. If you could put that up, that would be wonderful. Is my my slide up?
Yes, it is. It's still showing.
Okay. You're talking about feelings. this word here, attokatsera, is translates in English to wisdom. And how does that wisdom activated? So I'm just going to talk about this word for a minute, and then we'll talk about how we use it and why it's important. Because the AT there, you can see on the left-hand side, that's one part of the word, the first part of the word, and that part of it is called a reflexive, which brings the action back to the pronoun. And in this case here, just in its stative form, it's wisdom. So it's a noun. We got the TSHER, the other side, which has got the nominalizer or the noun maker. So we've taken this TOKHA. That part is all about feeling. And when we think about feeling, our first thoughts are physical senses, like the 5 physical senses. And what is not talked about in the physical senses is the ones in English they call 6th sense. Those are the sensations that you get. In some ways they get talked about in the sense that I've heard the term third eye, but I've not heard much more about like how we do that with our hearing and how we do that with our sensations and all other senses. But there, in our language, we have the 5 physical senses, and we have these 5 invisible senses. But they're the ones that cover the area of, you talked about how does somebody know how somebody else is feeling? It's because you sense it. We were this was part of the thing that we were originally given as to nurture. This is a precious thing, and we lose it if we don't use it. So that TOKHA is that active part of the verb. Then we have that apathetic aspirate there, which is just the sound. An aspirate, a sound, is like a breath of air there. And TSHER just makes all of that into a noun, and it becomes the wisdom, and the A at the end is how it exists. But if I put a K at the front of this word and take off the nominalizer, and then I can say something like gat dukha, which then translates to mean I'm smart. So when we're thinking about the balance, there's always the opposite side, just like the duality that I talked about earlier. The duality has to do with 2 energies, which is part of the same energy. And the best way I can describe that is like a magnet. The magnet, you can only see those energy cycles, if you will, or how they react. If you take a piece of paper and you take the magnet and you put it underneath the piece of paper and you put shavings of metal across the top, dust, and then you can actually see the energy loops that it makes. And so there's a positive energy and there's a negative energy. But you have to remember that we were taught also to be aware of both of those and to keep that knowledge intact. Because if we don't, we've been given a free will, and it's easy enough to say, oh, well, you know, it's so-and-so's fault. No, it isn't. It's your fault. You're the one that decided to go this way. And so you can't complain what happens if you've taken a negative path. You'll only realize that when you all of a sudden discover that this is not the place that you want to be. And if you don't take any action to correct it, it's going to remain that way, or it's just going to get worse, or you're going to end up, you know, in a very, very sad state, just like Carlos, what you said about, you know, how people are feeling. Why are they so I don't know, confused? Why are they so despondent? Why are they so sad? Why are they so this way? It's because their routine has been interrupted and they don't have anything to replace it with, even though they have that ability. And so that constant reminding ourselves that we have in our language many, many words that start with a dual feature. And that dual feature tells us that there's two things going on. So if I said I'm hungry, it doesn't tell you anything about what's going on. But in our language, it does. It's telling you that there's two things going on. There's a deficiency in your body is telling you something. And the way to solve it, we know the answer to that is to go find yourself some decent food and then everything is back in balance again. But we hardly ever think about it. And our language, at least in the Iroquois languages, that tells us, that reminds us constantly that there's all of these things going on, like positive and negative, and they're part of the same energy. And to stay balanced, now we have to be aware of both of those things because we were given a free will. And so that's how this wisdom comes about. It's, you know, being quiet and hearing or sensing, feeling it. It's like some people talk about, oh, I've got this, what do they say, a gut feeling? Well, that's real. And we don't practice it enough. It happens in really severe situations, and maybe some of us have experienced it with that. So I'd like to just pass the ball back there and see if there's something else that we, that hasn't been explained in today's presentation, or whether there's any other questions.
Let me just say a couple of things. I think I maybe misunderstood. So respectfully, I'll just reflect back a little bit. There was a conversation about uniformity in nature, and that Western science is looking at the uniformity. They want to see the similarities or patterns, suggested natural order. For example, the lion is the king of the jungle. Those kinds of taxonomies, right, that are created. Fish taxonomies, birds of prey are the high level versus sparrow, who's a lowly little kid, right? So there's that. But in our ways of thinking about this is that we look at these as a systematic observation, where we look at the differences, we relish the differences, we look at the differences where plants are living things. They're not male or female. They're not dependent on size or hardness or softness. And we look at these plants as living beings that are able to grow, change, and reproduce and live and die as like a human being. So there are like these three categories that Mesoamericans looked at were was plants, trees, bushes, and herbs. And essentially the suffix was to indicate whether they were food, ornamental, medicinal, economic, or used for building or clothing or objects. In other words, like you said, when we step back and look at the cosmos and we know that we're made of stardust and we're made of these stars themselves, and we have this energy and we can tell the frequencies, we know the sixth sense, as you mentioned, then because of that, we should be able to communicate with plants and animals. We should be able to do that. But what happens is we have been put in this mindset where elders, they don't have the PhD, like professor such and such at university of such and such. So because our kids are growing with this philosophy that you need this test, you need to do a multiple choice test and get the answer right, that there is no interconnectedness. There is a difference between apple and orange and these systems. We know them as fruit. We know them as all these great things that are there for us. We know the difference between a cloud, a water cloud and a non-water cloud. So all of these different things, I think I wanted to reflect back so that I respected your words, that all things communicate and these frequencies are there and their stars communicate. And you described that through the tellings. So I wanted to just, come back to that and shift it over to Karen, who is really leading this big conversation. And there's a lot there, right? So thank you for doing the conversation, if you will.
Thank you. Thank you both. I'm feeling almost like my head is about to explode. There's just so much there and communicated with such care and gentleness that I just wanted to just extend my appreciation for that. I heard so much tonight. This conversation is undoing in a lot of ways. The tellings that were shared are, especially to think about the interstitial spaces in a turtle's back where life emerged. Those interstitial spaces are the spaces of profound possibility. That I just wanted to say that all of these tellings tonight dwell in those spaces of profound possibilities for how we can all kind of think about our next moves, like tomorrow morning, what we do, how we move about the world. So thank you for all of that. I also wanted to just reiterate a couple of provocations that I heard tonight. So Grandmother Moon is slowly pulling away from us. We have tenders of our fires or of the fire. We miss each other when we are not in alignment. We aspire to be the ways of our elders. What do we fall into when it comes into emotional spectrums? So I'm thinking about sky being falling. What is Sky Woman falling into over and over again? And how do we think about our relationships with each other and with more than human as a falling into, and to take the time to consider what are we falling into? How do we imagine our relationality with others' frequencies? And how can we create spaces of possibilities in that interstitial space between sky and land? So thank you, everybody. I am, as everybody who's listening, are in such utter appreciation for tonight's tellings and sharings. Just very grateful. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Jody, did you want to say anything this time?
Karen, can I say?
I did
can I
notice
say
there was a
something?
question. Oh, go ahead.
Let me just say something that I think is important, as you asked about how do we leave this conversation and have something to consider, if you will. And one of our big scholars is Blind Deloria Jr., as you may all know. And he said something in that, and I wrote it down. It says, the fundamental factor that keeps, he uses the word Indians, it keeps Indians and non-Indians from communicating is that they are speaking about two entire different perceptions of the world. And I think until we come to that point, when we are actually honoring our ways of communicating with the world, I think we can have these deeper, more connected conversations with each other. So I just wanted to share that piece with you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jody, did you want to say something?
Oh, I was just saying there was a question in the chat box. Did you want to? Somebody had asked in the writing of the creation story by John Arthur Gibson, Onondaga, Skyholder's name is written as, I'm not even going to be able to pronounce this, and it's translated as he grasped the sky in two places. I'm curious if you have any comments on this, or if we were to pick apart Skyholder's name in Ganyagaha, what might we learn about these two places? Are you familiar with that at all, Tehahenteh?
Yeah, all our Iroquois languages are related through verbs. And the name in Mohawk anyway is Tarunhiawago, which embracer of the sky. So the Onondaga word is very similar. And so how we translate it isn't always exactly the same, because it creates an image in your mind. And so thinking about is like, I don't know, metaphorically, I guess, like arms stretched out and just embracing the whole, all of the heavens. So that means that he is also everywhere. If it's male, but it's an entity. So that male female thing is kind of like one. So it's not really because what we're talking about is we're talking about light beings and beings that are pure energy, and so our only terms of reference is what we understand, and what we understand basically, to some extent anyway, is the physical world. Does that help?
Well, it sounds good to me. I think, we're looking at the time here. Karen, is there anything else you need to say or do at this time?
Sure, yeah. So I suppose it's important that we kind of consider and think through alongside the knowledge holders, thinking about sort of relational practices of how we can cite each other's work. So thinking through those important practices of recognizing all of the protocols and processes that our knowledge holders tonight have offered into the worlds in order to think about and align themselves with tonight's gestures and offerings and knowledges. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of those people that show you both care in this particular moment in time, and who have shown you care, like grandmothers, grandfathers, family members. I see that Tehahenteh, your family members with you right now. So I just wanted to extend my appreciation to all those people that care for you, and for the support that they give you so that you can do the work that you're doing. I know that we don't operate alone, so thank you for that. I'd also like to just say that I hope people feel well tonight. I hope that your families are well, and to just give my love to us, because I know that this is a very, very difficult time that folks are holding space for right now for our Black relatives and kin. So I just wanted to give my love.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Karen. I wasn't going to speak anymore. It's in our traditions, it's disrespectful to keep talking, but I wanted to also take this opportunity to share that there's a lot of pain and a lot of energy, if you will, and that energy is being transformed into action. And as we take these actions to identify the spectrum of the have and the have-nots, and the color spectrum, as some folk would say, we begin to learn about ourselves and our own traditions and our own ways and what we can do to actually be in that space. So I share with you all the same prayers, the same ways of connecting with each other. At the end of the day, we're all made of these 6 elements, I think, that we discussed yesterday. And so as we come together as a humanity, as a way, as people, that I hope that all of you tonight, after you leave, that you can pray and hold your loved one and share and transfer that energy and that vibration that Tehahenteh has so eloquently discussed, so that we know that we are protected, we are loved by this great spirit that is coming to us and is giving us this energy. When you look at the stars tonight, feel that energy, that electromagnetism, if you will, enter your body and transform you into a new being, so that when you awake, if you're given life, that you are of service to everyone that is around you, including the plants, including the animals, including yourself. That as we move with together as a united community. So thank you for letting me say those words.
So just before we close out, I just want to mention here that we do have one more, well, there might be another one actually after this, but next week, we are delighted to have Tehahenteh Painting with us, who's Maori from New Zealand, and our one and only host, Karen here, will actually move from the host role into actually sharing in this conversation. So that is next week. So join us again and please register for that. I will be following up with an email to all of you with the link to this recording. They do eventually will be getting to our website here, but for now we are uploading them to our YouTube channel. So I will share out that link so that you have it. And for those who weren't able to join us tonight, we'll also have that. And I will also send the registration link for next week's session. So I'm going to just ask Tehahenteh, I know that you started with some opening words. I'm not sure if you have words that you wanted to close with.
Yes, thank you. Nagari suwadong siyo ska nagari west. Nene zinahodon sungwat ka wani. Got to Johonjade. Nene ro yinada nene got ni gon layan dasta. Nene dietino what I don't sige. Wait soon that I'll go no ye how ne eat ni stahan Johonjade. Diet to ne doing any guani go. Ne oni, then it's it karum yade. Sa uyero zini sungwat ka wani. And I'll go scotty did why in a wago. And I'm going out there stock. Nangadi tonight no oni and then they tino parado, Nadium Kiadum, Nanazini, Monkia Darhase. Nagadi net to know what did he know what I don't know. Diet to net doing getting what they go. Ne nua, and the one I don't go and see the one I don't go and some way at diesel, ne, roy in a datum. Nene Zini ni hoyera, Aguego Yatagayed, Zini, the Hori Canyon. Nena ones a guegum da nuzi garun yada. Nugadi 8 to 8 nua on the Wahawe, night on the Wago. Then I got any go rio, Miss Gona, I go not on yesterday. Diet to me to I get a go any go. Diet to Nigawan again, done on 8. So just a few words that we said that we had drawn from this well of knowledge, the things that we are to be contemplating. And so the first part of that was to the people and where the people walk today, which is upon the back of our mother, the earth, because she has all of this energy, all of these things that she gives to us each and every day. And she never tires of continually trying to regenerate. And we have a part in this, and it's our part. And it's not good enough just to be giving thanks. We need to be a part of this reciprocal relationship with our relatives. When I say relatives, I'm talking about everything on earth and everything in the sky world. We're all related because we're all made, as Carlos said, all made from the same thing. And we all share this. So in the sky world, also, we give thanks, like greetings, love, and respect to our protectors, because they were in fact with us throughout this presentation, and we give them thanks for that. Also to creation, or if you wish to say creator, this great intelligent energy, we say thank you that you put all of these things together in a perfect way. And now that becomes our responsibility to honor that creation. And this is how our minds are to be. So those are the words that were given today. Daeta.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone,
Thank
for
you.
attending. Have a safe evening, and hopefully we'll see you next week for the next one. Take care, everyone.